A Christmas Miscellany by Various. Number 1, The Seventh Christmas, by Coningsby Dawson. 1. It was the 7th Christmas. In the village of Nazareth, which some say means flowery, all the children save one had wakened that morning quite unexcited and without any hope of presents. Grown people had gone, as usual, about their daily work. All the shops were open. No one felt any kinder than was ordinary. No one said, 7 years ago today Jesus was born in Bethlehem. No one had forgiven his enemy, for it was not over Nazareth that the angels had sung, "Peace, goodwill toward men." Had you wandered down that quiet village street, where no snow had fallen and no windows were decorated with holly, where sandal-footed girls were coming out from houses balancing pitchers on their heads, you would never have guessed that it was the morning of the 7th Christmas. Even in the carpenter's cottage where the little Jesus dwelt, his father and mother seemed to have forgotten. And perhaps his father had, for bread was hard to earn. But his mother, though she did not show it, had remembered. On this day of all days she pondered in her heart the wonders that had been foretold about her son at his birth. On this day of all days she watched for the angels to return. But the wonders were long in commencing, and had she told to any of her neighbors the miracle that had happened at Bethlehem, they would have thought it an idle tale she had invented. Though she had remembered that it was Jesus' birthday, she was ashamed to own it, for she had no present for him and scarcely any food in the house. So when the one child in Nazareth, the only child in all the world who knew that it was Christmas, had awakened that morning, it had seemed to him that the world did not care. At first he was disappointed, but when he saw the trouble in his mother's eyes, he sang to make her glad. Before the day was ended, something was sure to happen. Something unexpected always did happen on his birthdays. 2 years ago a shepherd had come all the way from Bethlehem, a 4 days' journey, carrying a lamb in his bosom. Still longer ago, before he could remember, someone had given him 3 golden caskets. His mother took care of them. She had never let him see inside them, and she had never told him their story. His father Joseph had been offered much money for them, but though they were poor, his mother had always refused to sell. All day he had waited for the unexpected to occur. As he helped his father at the carpenter's bench, he watched his mother seated in the doorway, clad in her striped robe and wrapped in a white linen shawl as in a shroud. Every time a camel train shuffled by, stirring up the dust on the road to Damascus, he could hear the coins jingle on her forehead. She too was waiting. For what, he wondered. The day dragged on. There was no midday meal. His 7th birthday, and no one had remembered. What did the birthday of a little boy matter when times were so hard in Nazareth? It was winter. Flowers had perished from the fields. Brooks were white with dashing water. A bleak look was over everything, and work was scarce. Younger carpenters were always passing down to the coast towns with the caravans. They were glad to ply their trade for the smallest hire. Joseph could not compete with them. He could no longer stoop for his tools or move quickly. If no one was at hand to remember for him, he would often make mistakes in his measurements. Then all the materials that he had worked upon were wasted. So Mary used to send the little Jesus with Joseph when people wanted to give him orders for doors and milk pails and beds and chests. But because he was so often in error, they wanted him less frequently. When they did, they beat him down in price because he was infirm. "Ah, friend Joseph," they would say, "thou wast once a good carpenter before thou didst journey into Egypt. The hot roads robbed thee of thy strength. If thou hadst only stayed in Nazareth." As Joseph turned away, the little Jesus would look up into his dim eyes and question, "Why didst thou not stay in Nazareth, Father?" And his father would reply, as though defending himself, "It was for thy sake that I went." "And did I go with thee? And was it there that they did give me the golden caskets?" But the old man would shake his head. "Perchance it was a dream. When thou art a man, thou mightest laugh at me if today I were to tell." Because Joseph was so old, there were times when he would fall asleep over his work. He gave the little Jesus orders always to stay near him to awake him. Then Jesus would try to bring comfort, saying, "I will grow up quickly, Father. When I am a man, thou shalt rest." But his mother, who was young and more beautiful than any of the mothers of Nazareth, would show fear at his words and clasp him to her, whispering, "Nay, little son, thou shalt be a child for long years yet." So it had gone on, and as Joseph's strength had failed him, they had grown poorer, till now, on the 7th Christmas, there was no food left in the carpenter's house. All day Joseph had toiled ceaselessly, and Jesus had done his best to help, that the ox yoke might be finished by evening, and they might have the money to buy bread. All day Mary had sat in the doorway, gazing up and down the sunlit village street, listening and watching. At times she would turn her eyes into the shop and ask a question. "And they sang glory in the highest, so the shepherds said. Was it not so, Joseph?" "It was so, if we did not dream it." He answered as one who was sure of nothing. As he bent his head, his white beard caught up the chips that lay upon the bench. "But the gifts from the East, the golden caskets, they are proofs. We still have them." "Aye, they are worth a king's ransom. Merchants going down to Damascus would purchase. I am very weary, Mary. Wilt thou not consent? If we were to sell—" Her eyes rested on him sorrowfully, the soft, dark eyes of a woman who had lived always in loneliness. "A king's ransom! And shall we sell the ransom of our king without his knowing?" She turned her gaze back to the village street, still desperately hoping. He should be great. He should rule over nations and sit upon the throne of David. That was what angels, shepherds, rich strangers had declared in Bethlehem on the night of his birth. Since that first Christmas there had been no more signs or portents, only escapes, long journeys, and uneventful poverty. It was as though with his birth the clouds had sealed up the stairway to the heavens and God had forgotten. No wonder Joseph was half persuaded that all the prophecies had been imagined. To the 3 golden caskets Mary's faith clung. At any moment royal messengers might come riding from Jerusalem to take her son away and crown him. Far down the road, through bare olive groves, she would see the smoke of their chariots. She had the little robe ready, which she had worked for him secretly in silk and silver thread. But if they were to come and the caskets were sold, how would they know that Jesus was the King for whom they were seeking? And yet Joseph was weak for want of bread. With the money that merchants would give them for the caskets, they might live all their lives in plenty. Seeing that his parents' hearts were troubled, again the little Jesus sang, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." From gray hillsides where shepherds sat among their flocks, the bleating of sheep answered. Women passing by to draw water at the well, and lean camel drivers of a halted caravan, paused to stare in at the carpenter's shop, arrested by the boys' clear singing. Their glances traveled from Jesus to his mother. "Blessed art thou among women," their eyes said. Then Mary felt rich, though she was hungry and had given her son no present. As the day faded and shadows lengthened, boys gathered about the doorway, crying to Jesus to come out among the cypresses and play at kings with them. He smiled gravely and shook his head. As they went away, he followed their voices out past the threshing floor to the wide, sweet silences where brooks babbled, and in summer time the country was golden with oranges and silver with the quivering leaves of olives. There, had he gone with them, they would have spread their sheepskin coats for a throne, and he would have sung to them. They would have plaited a crown and set it on his head as though he had been Herod. He would have molded sparrows out of clay for them, so like to life that it seemed he had but to toss them in the air for them to spread their wings and vanish. When evening was a blue smoke blown among the sheepfolds and lights were twinkling in windows of Nazareth, they would have brought him back, riding on their shoulders and shouting before him. But the ox yoke was not yet finished. Their voices died out in the distance. "I am too old. I cannot." The tools fell from Joseph's hands. For a moment he swayed above the carpenter's bench. Then gathering his cloak before his face, he slipped to the bed of shavings that strewed the floor and slept. "Thou must wake him as he did bid thee," Mary whispered. Jesus bent over him. "He is weary. Would that I were a man. Then would I finish the yoke myself." "But thou art still a child, and there is no bread in the house. Thou must wake him." Jesus stood up and spread abroad his arms. The shadow of the cross fell behind him. Mary covered her eyes with her hands. Jesus ran to her and threw his arms about her. "See, I will sit beside thee and protect thee. But he shall rest. Hadst thou forgotten, mother? This day I am 7 and nearly a man." "Little one, I had not forgotten. But all day my heart hath ached for thee. I have nothing that I can give thee. I had hoped that thou hadst not remembered." He laid his face against her breast. The memory of the cross faded. Again he was the tiny babe with whom she had fled into strange countries, seeing nothing of the perils that beset her because of the hopes she had had. Once more, beneath the sunset, she cast her eyes along the road, watching for the smoking wheels of chariots. The road was empty, the heavens silent. No sign save the cross had been vouchsafed to her of the promised splendors. Slowly, like sheep following into a meadow, the stars came out. One by one, in windows of the village street, lights were extinguished. The closing of doors and rustling of lowered curtains were heard. The chill of the Eastern December night crept into the air. In the darkness at the back of the carpenter's shop, Joseph slept. It seemed in that shuttered world that of all those faithful ones who had greeted the babe at Bethlehem, she alone was left to worship. They had given him gold and frankincense then, but now? Did he slumber? She glanced down. Through the dusk his eyes were gazing up at her. She remembered her own girlhood and the excitement of her birthdays. He should not be disappointed. She must give him something. But what, when she was so poor that she could not even give him bread? 2. "Art thou sleepy?" He shook his head against his mother's breast. He had been listening to the bleating of the sheep. It was like waves beating among the misty hills. Far beyond white walls of the village, as far as eyes could reach, he could see the blur of sheepfolds, the glow of campfires, and the shadowy outlines of watchful figures standing crook in hand beneath the stars. He was thinking of the song that had been with him all day, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Lest he should feel the cold, his mother drew him closer, spreading her linen shawl about him like a tent. "When thou playest at kings with the village boys, thou art always the king. Is it not so?" she whispered. "I will tell thee the story of a king who was born on the same day as thou wast." "Then today will be his birthday." She smiled in the darkness. "Today he too is 7. It is a very marvelous story." "A true story?" "A true story, but so marvelous that thou mightest not believe it, were it not I who told thee." Jesus remembered Joseph's words, "When thou art a man, thou mightest laugh at me, if today I were to tell thee." He sat very breathless, for he knew that now he was to learn why his father had taken that long journey into Egypt. And he thought that if he listened intently, he might learn whence had come the mysterious golden caskets, which his mother would not sell, though much money had been offered. "I, Mary, knew the mother of this king." Her lips trembled against his cheek, and her voice came tenderly. "Doth it seem strange to thee, little Jesus, that thy mother should have known the mother of a king?" Every morning and evening with the village girls she would go to draw water at the well. As she went down the street with her empty pitcher, she had to pass a carpenter's shop. The carpenter would pause in his work to smile up at her. Sometimes, when she was returning, he would lay aside his tools and step out to gaze after her. There came a day when he took the pitcher from her hand. "It is too heavy for thee," he said. After that, whenever he saw her returning, he would carry the brimming pitcher for her. But this, all this was before the king's coming, and is not what I meant to tell thee. She ceased. In the quiet of her heart she was dreaming to herself that part of the story. One evening, she said, when the air was sweet with flowers, she was sitting alone in her garden. In the stillness she heard a rush of wings like to the sound of swallows darting. With the sound of wings came a light that was dazzling. When she looked up, standing in the path before her was an angel who had been sent to her from God. Jesus pressed against her eagerly. "And did he tell her aught of the golden caskets?" Mary laughed gently. Remembering had made her happy, so that she had forgotten her poverty. Stooping, she kissed the uplifted face. "Nay, be patient. The golden caskets come later." He told her that she should be the mother of a king, and that among women she should be called blessed, for the king, when he came, should be the Son of God, and should bring love into the world. To be the mother of a king must be very blessed. The little boy spoke gravely. "And after that, mother, what did he tell her?" Spreading his wings, he flew away till the flash of his going grew faint above the palm trees in the gold of the sunset. Next morning the carpenter watched for her to pass. When she did not go to draw water at the well, he came in search of her. She was still sitting where the angel had left her, gazing straight before her. For, as thou sayest, to be the mother of a king is very blessed, but it is very terrible to be the mother of the Son of God. Then the carpenter asked her why she had not been to draw water. Now, though he was a good man, he had never seen an angel, and so when she told him... Behind, in the darkness, Joseph stirred. "I cannot," he muttered, "I cannot." In his dream he was still troubled because the ox yoke was unfinished. Through the shadows Mary spoke to him. Sighing like a child, he ceased from his muttering and slept peaceably. "And because he had never seen an angel?" Jesus questioned. Mary turned back from gazing into the dimness of the shop. Because he was a good man, he came to understand at last. Through the summer, while the oranges were yellowing, they lived very happily. In the evenings, in the garden where the angel had appeared to her, the carpenter carved a royal cradle with cherubim upon it, and she wove robes in preparation for the king's coming. It was in the winter, just before he was expected, that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should go, every one to his own city, to be taxed. Having closed his shop, the carpenter bought an ass and set the mother of the unborn king upon it. "Was it not a camel, mother, all covered with gold and purple, such as princes from far countries ride when they pass through Nazareth to the bazaar at Damascus?" She bowed her head. It was the question she herself would have asked. "It is a true story," she whispered, "and very marvelous, more marvelous as it goes on. The mother of God's Son set out riding on an ass, and the carpenter walked beside her with his staff." Roads were thronged with merchants and soldiers and caravans, with people traveling like the carpenter, every one to his own city to be taxed. As the mother of God's Son passed, no one noticed her. Men in the fields did not look up from their plowing. Often the carpenter would have to draw the ass aside, lest she should be splashed by the wheels of a chariot. She watched them all. She had never known that there were so many people in the world. "All these my son shall rule," she thought. Through the rose gardens of Jericho she traveled, till on the fourth day, as the sun was setting, Jerusalem blazed up like a golden temple. "It is here that he will come to be crowned," she thought. "Perchance it is here he will be born." But Jerusalem was crowded, and the carpenter had kinsfolk in Bethlehem, which was but a 6 miles' journey. So, though she was weary, and the ass stumbled in his steps, and the carpenter's feet were sore, they left the domes of Jerusalem behind them and hurried on. Mary sighed at the remembered pain of that Hebron road, the jolting of the rough track through the mountains, and the forlornness of her thoughts. Jesus lifted up his arms, drawing down his mother's face to him. Thus they sat in silence. "Had I been there, I would have helped thee," he said at last. "Thou?" She peered into his eyes, frightened by his quietness. "Little Jesus, thou hast guessed?" It was as though, beneath the gay seriousness of his childishness, he had always known that he was the Son of God. The earthly mother in her shrank from the thought, as she had shrunk from the shadow of the cross. It made him too little hers in making him so largely God's. "There is much that thou canst not understand," she faltered. "Some day, when thou art older—" "Yet tell me," he pleaded, "am I not nearly a man? Today I am 7." "Yea, today thou art 7, and I have no present for thee. Therefore I will tell thee." It was growing dark as we climbed up to Bethlehem. Far away in the clouds, like a white palace hewn from the moonlight, it shone. Every window was illumined, and all along the road we met travelers turning back. "There is no room," they called to us, "no room." But Joseph pressed forward, for he had kinsfolk living there. He thought they would take pity on my necessity. We came to the last ascent and the gateway. We entered. He went from door to door, inquiring for shelter, that I might find rest. His kinsfolk and friends with one accord began to make excuses. "If we had but known of thy coming! If thou hadst but arrived earlier!" Even at the inn there was no place left for us. When my strength was gone, hard by the courtyard of the inn we found a cave in the rocks, where cattle were stalled. The kindly beasts made way for us, and there, on such a starry night as this is, thou who shalt be ruler over all the world, wast born. He raised himself in her lap, leaning against her breast and turning her face toward him. "Dost thou believe it?" Again the question that oppressed her heart. "Why dost thou ask?" His child's eyes reached up to hers through the dark. "Because we are poor." "I was poor then." Her voice broke and sank. "I was Mary of Nazareth, as I am now. Ah, but I believed it, for there were signs and portents and wonders in the heavens. Yea, and I still believe it. Have I not treasured all these memories in my heart? I wrapped thee in swaddling clothes and laid thee in a manger, because there was no room for thee in the abodes of men, no room for the Son of God. Come near to me, little Jesus. When I hold thee, so I can still believe that I, Mary of Nazareth, am rich and blessed. For 7 long years, as many years as thou art, I have kept silent, but now I will tell thee. There were shepherds in the fields of Bethlehem, keeping watch over their flocks that night. Dost thou remember how one of them came to Nazareth a 4 days' journey, bringing thee a lamb in his arms? And lo, as they watched their flock, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them. And they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, For behold, I bring unto you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all nations. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you: ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger." And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away up into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us." And they came with haste, and found thee lying in the manger. Scarcely had they departed, when a great clamor of trumpets rose upon the night, and the sound of men beating upon doors and demanding, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? We have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship." So Joseph stepped out from the cave among the rocks and looked down into the courtyard. There he saw a train of camels caparisoned in gold and purple, like to the camels on which princes ride when they go through Nazareth to the bazaar at Damascus. And from all their necks hung bells that tinkled, and the men who sat upon them waved torches. So great was the company that it spread like a river beneath the city gate and far down the hill. At the head of it rode 3 kings with shining crowns, and their servants beat upon the doors and shouted, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? We have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship." Then the householders rose from sleep and looked out from their windows. "There hath been no king in Bethlehem, my lords, since David." And the master of the inn opened his door, lest his guests should be disturbed, and made angry. "No king hath been born in Bethlehem," he said, "but perchance in Jerusalem it may have happened." Then the 3 lords lifted up their arms and pointed. "It hath led us from the east," they chanted. "For many nights it hath moved before us." And while they yet spake, a star was let down from heaven, and came to rest like a lantern above the cave where thou wast lying. "It is naught but a hole in the rocks, where beasts are stalled," said the innkeeper. But when the 3 kings saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy, and made haste to descend from their camels. And when they were come into the cave, and saw thee lying in my arms, as I sat among the oxen, they fell on their faces and worshipped. "My lords, whence are ye come to me?" I asked. Then they uncovered their faces, and I saw that one was a boy, smooth of face and ruddy of countenance; and one was a man in the power of his strength, tanned by the desert and black-bearded. One was white as snow, with eyes that blazed like fires, and so old that his voice was like a reed shaken. And it was he who answered, "Mother of mothers, from the east have we journeyed, and all the gods of Persia have called thee blessed. Long have we waited for thy son to be born, for our prophet Zoroaster foretold his coming. And we have a book which bears the name of Seth, the son of Adam, wherein all things are written concerning the star. And in the land of Persia we have a temple, in which are kept the images of our gods and goddesses. On the night on which the star, long awaited, appeared, all our gods and goddesses were heard talking together. In the morning, when we entered the temple, all the images were fallen on their faces. Then we rode forth, following the star. Hither we have come bearing presents." Then 3 slaves appeared, each standing behind his lord, and bearing in his arms a golden casket. And the oldest lord took from his slave his casket, and lifted therefrom a crown, which he set upon thy forehead, saying, "This crown I give unto thee for power. The gold whereof it is made consisteth of 30 pieces, which were a funeral offering unto Adam. It was carried with his body in the ark, and afterward was coined by Terah. It was for these pieces also that Joseph was sold into Egypt by his brethren. Next they were paid as tribute unto Pharaoh, and with them Joseph bought from Sheba the perfumes for the body of his father Jacob. In after times the queen of Sheba made a present of them unto Solomon, and so they remained at Jerusalem till Israel was carried captive into Babylon. Now that thou art come, the East yields them back to thee." Then the second lord, who was black-bearded, took from his slave his casket, and when he had opened it, there stole forth a sweet fragrance. "This frankincense," he said, and his voice was like a strong wind blowing, "the East yields unto thee for worship." Then the third lord, who was smooth of face, with the foreboding of youth in his eyes, took tremblingly from the hands of his slave his casket, and his voice was like the weeping of a woman. Mary fell silent. Slowly, one by one, her tears crept down till they fell upon the face of Jesus. "Mother, tell me. Nay, mother, thou didst promise." "From the East," he said, "I bring thee myrrh, which signifieth death, a gift to every man of woman born." Then they each one took thee in their arms and gazed very wonderingly. "On account of the smallness of my means, I gave unto them one of thy swaddling bands, which those great lords received with every mark of reverence. And when they had bidden thee farewell, they would not go into the inn, because it had refused to give thee shelter. But they tethered their camels in the courtyard, and they raised their tents beneath the stars. While they slept, an angel appeared unto them, saying, Get thee up, and depart swiftly another way. So they arose and set out for the ships at Tarshish. By morning they were gone. And the same angel spake unto Joseph in a dream, Arise, take the young child, and escape into Egypt, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. And we straightway fled, taking with us the golden caskets. As we hurried along, I riding on the ass, and Joseph walking with his staff, soldiers came marching from Jerusalem and entered into Bethlehem, inquiring diligently for a holy child which had been born. And when they found thee not, they put all the children that were in Bethlehem to the sword. From the white city on the mountain height a cry went up, women weeping for their children, who would not be comforted because they were not. In Egypt work was hard to find. The roads were hot, and Joseph grew old through poverty. Homesickness came upon us for Nazareth, for its olive groves, its sheepfolds, and its shadowy twilights. Then word came to us that Herod was dead, and that Archelaus reigned in the room of his father. So we returned to the carpenter's shop, with naught left to us of all these glories, save only the golden caskets. The rest thou knowest. 3. From behind them the breathing of Joseph came softly. Upon the face of Jesus the tears of Mary fell. He sat as one entranced, awestruck, and smiling, thinking of the 3 great Persian lords, and of the many camels which were like a river, and of the waving torches. Whither had they sailed in the ships from Tarshish, and had the star, which was like a lantern, still gone before them? Then he thought of Herod, and of the old age that Egypt had brought upon Joseph. I was so small, wherefore did he wish to kill me? Because of the question that the lords had asked, calling thee the King of the Jews. It is the game at which I play with the village boys. Mother, but am I... She pressed her lips against his to silence them. Thou art a child, the son of Mary. Herod was not good. He feared lest God should wrest his throne from him. Jesus laughed, holding up his hands in the moonlight and spreading wide his fingers. Mary took his hands and bent over him. Why dost thou laugh? Because they are so small. Yet thou sayest that he feared them. Archelaus is King of the Jews, while I lack bread. Mother, dost thou think that when I am a man I shall wrest his throne from him? Hush! She clutched him to her. Say no more. Say nothing of what I have told thee. If any should have heard thee... Thou art young. Think no more of it. Let it be as a dream that thou wilt forget shortly. "But it was no dream. Thou didst say it was no dream." "Nay, it was no dream," she whispered. A true story! He sat in thought. He who wore a sheepskin coat and helped in the carpenter's shop and went about with Joseph remembering his measurements. He was the Son of God. "It is my 7th birthday," he said. "Let me look into the golden caskets." In the barrenness of the present, her heart cried out for such a confirmation of the glories that were past. Rising, she entered the shop on tiptoe for fear of waking Joseph. From the place where she had hidden them in readiness for the arrival of charioteers and horsemen who would summon her son to his crowning, she brought them forth. With them she brought the royal robe that she had woven. In the shuttered street, with nothing stirring save the distant flocks and none to watch her save the stars, she put the robe upon him. When looking down at the kingly shadow that he cast, his eyes danced with gladness, and he clapped his hands childishly. She caught his excitement. How often she had longed to array him in these splendors! Surely tonight, late though it was, some sign would come to tell her that God's angels still kept guard. Tremblingly, opening the first casket, she drew forth the crown and set it shining on his forehead. "It is for power," she said. From the second she drew forth the frankincense and scattered it upon his raiment. "It is for worship." But the third casket, containing the gift which signifieth death, she did not open. As she watched him on the threshold of the carpenter's shop, palely attired, with the moonlight throwing a halo round him, the sorrow of her long waiting was forgotten. Her thoughts fled back to the garden of her girlhood and the angel who had come to her out of the sunset. It was enough, though all the world was careless, that she was left faithful. Falling on her knees with her arms around him, she sang whisperingly the hymn of her thankfulness. "My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit hath rejoiced in God my Saviour. For he that is mighty hath done to me great things, hath done to me great things." Her faith stumbled. Suddenly she remembered that her child was hungry, her child whom she shared with God. Then, because he was smiling, she took new courage. "And holy is his name." She had sung thus far when Jesus held up his hand, listening and saying nothing. At first she thought he had heard Joseph stirring. The sound of a man sleeping still fell gently. She turned her head, supposing that in the street he had seen someone coming. Then she too heard it, the thud, thud, thudding of a swiftly approaching camel, and a voice which panted on the night. "Where is he? Where is he?" The question got no farther, for the breath of the rider came sobbingly. Through olive groves bare of leaves a dromedary came racing, swaying and staggering from weariness. It was the kind that princes ride when they pass through Nazareth to the bazaar at Damascus, but it came unfollowed and solitary. From its neck hung a silver bell which tinkled. It was caparisoned in purple and gold, but the purple had faded and the gold was tarnished. Upon it sat a man, gaunt and haggard, whose raiment was gray with the dust of travel. He leant peering forward. His throat was parched, so that at times when his lips moved, he uttered nothing. Urging his beast, he rode past the threshing floor and commenced the ascent into Nazareth. Between shuttered houses, casting his eyes from side to side, he whispered as he approached, "Where is he? Where is he?" As though he had been the survivor of a lost army, the memory of defeat clung upon him. Kneeling beside Jesus, Mary watched. All day she had waited for ambassadors and lordly caravans, for a repetition of that first miraculous Christmas. Now, while the world slept, came this lonely man fleeing through the night like a shadow. He seemed half blind. He would have gone by the carpenter's shop, but Mary rose to her feet. He halted. "Where is he who is born King of the Jews?" he questioned hoarsely. "Once when I was young, on such a night as this, I found him. Tonight there are many stars, but no star to guide me." She came out from the shadow and stared up into the face of the stranger. "Whence art thou?" Bending down from his dromedary, he gazed at her puzzled, as though she brought memories. "From the East," he whispered. His voice was like the sound of a woman sobbing. "We had waited so long, I who was young, and Melchior who was old, and Balthazar who was midway between us. At last we found him, and all the gods of Persia fell upon their faces and called him blessed. Again we have waited, we have lost him, and the East grows doubting, for the world hath not changed from what it was. It seems a dream, all that we thought once happened. Melchior is dying, he longs for certainty. So without a star to guide me, because my faith is greatest, I, who am the youngest of we three kings, have journeyed forth. Where is he who is born King of the Jews? If thou canst tell me, I will give thee... But I can give thee nothing, for I have spent my all in the searching. Out of kindness, canst thou tell me?" Mary turned her head, glancing back across her shoulder. The gaze of the youngest lord followed. Gropingly he descended. His eyes met the eyes of the child. In the moonlight he saw the crown which shone upon his forehead, the white robe which garbed him, and the 3 golden caskets, 2 of them open, which lay at his feet before him. The fragrance of frankincense stole upon the air, making the night a temple. "It is true! It is true! It was no dream!" Running forward, he would have bowed himself in worship, but something stopped him. Was it his own loneliness, or the loneliness of the childish kingly figure? Instead, he took him in his arms. "I came to thee before with a lordly train and trumpets blowing," he whispered. "Now I come to thee stained with the dust of travel and empty-handed. What is there I can give thee?" Jesus stroked the haggard face. "It is my 7th birthday, and my mother is hungry." From about his waist the Lord unloosed a pouch in which were bread and dates. Sitting in the doorway of the carpenter's shop, he spread them out before Jesus and his mother. "Were I in my own country," he said, "I would give thee a palace of white marble, with fountains playing, and hanging gardens, and slaves to serve thee. Here I am poor, but such as I have I give thee." When the meal was ended, they talked, and Jesus laughed and sang to them, but always softly, for fear of disturbing Joseph. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And he taught his song to the young lord, that when he returned to his own people he might say, "It is thus that the little Jesus singeth." The night wore on. The Persian lord would have stayed till morning, for the delight he had in holding the Son of Mary. But Mary reminded him, "Melchior is old and dying. It is a long journey. What can we send to him to make him certain?" Then they thought of the crown, but he himself had given it and might be offended. And they thought of the frankincense, but that was all gone. There was nothing in the shop to send him save the carpenter's tools, which would prove nothing. Moreover, Joseph would need them for finishing the ox yoke in the morning. The child spoke. "Let us send him the 3rd casket, for it hath not been opened." "Nay," said Mary, for she knew what it contained. "Myrrh, which signifieth death, a gift to every man of woman born." But Jesus freed himself from the arms of the young lord and brought it to him. "I will open it," he said, "and look just once, for it was thy gift to me." When he raised the lid, a dazzling light burst forth, so that all save Jesus was blinded. But Jesus clapped his hands and laughed, for, instead of the gift which signifieth death, out from the casket drifted the star. When the Persian lord saw it floating up into the heavens, he fell on his knees and worshipped. "The star which we had lost!" he cried. "The star which we had lost!" Halting above the carpenter's shop, dimming even the moon by the brightness of its shining, it waited for him to follow. Holding the hand of Jesus, Mary stood gazing down the village street, watching him depart. Directly he was mounted, the star moved eastward toward the dawn, going to bring faith to the dying eyes of Melchior. Only once, when at the point of vanishing the Persian lord drew up to wave his hand, did it stay its march across the heavens. When the thudding of the dromedary had died out in the olive groves, they returned to the doorway of the carpenter's shop. As they sat there, in the grayness of the morning, Mary slumbered, and the little Jesus drew her robe about her to keep her warm. Then he took the crown from off his forehead and set it back in its casket. And he took off his kingly garment and put on his sheepskin jacket, for he knew that soon the people of Nazareth would be stirring, and they would wonder to see him thus apparelled. And he said to himself, "I am nearly a man. Am I not 7?" So he did what he had never done before. He took Joseph's tools and he worked upon the ox yoke. Now when Mary awakened and remembered, she thought she had been dreaming. But when she searched for the third casket, which had contained the gift that signifieth death, it was gone. While she was still troubled in her spirit, Joseph awoke, uttering a glad cry, and called her to him. By the bench she found him marveling, for the ox yoke was finished, and the little Jesus lay asleep on the shavings in the corner. Bending over the childish hands, she saw that they were blistered with toil for her. Then she fell to smiling and weeping. "Of a truth," she whispered, "he is the Son of God." End of number 1. Number 2 of A Christmas Miscellany by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Number 2, The Day After Christmas by Joyce Kilmer. Of course, people still ride on the elevated railways, but not the people who used to be taken over by their mothers from Jersey City on the Cortlandt Street ferry about once every month, and then up Sixth Avenue by the elevated en route for the shops. These people now know the swift and monotonous tube train instead of the rakish ferry boat, the dull subway instead of the stimulating elevated railway. And even if they knelt upon the seats of the subway car, their rubbers projecting into the aisles and their faces pressed against the windows, they would see only blank walls and dismal stations instead of other people's Christmas trees. These evanescent bits of glory lent special delight to aerial journeyings for weeks after Christmas. For in defiance of the Twelfth Night Convention, certain citizens were wont to keep their Christmas trees in place until February. And in the opinion of the tenants of the third stories of the tenements, apartment houses is the more courteous word, which bordered the elevated, the place of the Christmas tree was close up against the front window, where all the world could enjoy its green and gold and red. Like nearly all genuine vulgar customs, vulgar is used in its most honorable sense, this habit of showing the public the home's chief splendor was, or is, for undoubtedly furs dressed for holiday still brighten some lower Sixth Avenue windows, based on generous courtesy. It was not possible for Mr. Tenement to keep open flat, so to speak, at Christmas time, to summon all Sixth Avenue in to partake of a bowl of wassail that steamed upon his gas range. But he performed all the hospitality that his ungentle residence allowed. He placed his bit of greenwood with its cardboard angel, its red paper bells, and its strings of tinsel where it would give to the greatest possible number the same delight that it gave to its owner. It is, you observe, in your own psychological way, the Rogers group principle. Your grandmother put "Going for the Cows," you remember, on the marble top of the walnut table by the window in the front parlor. The Nottingham lace curtains were parted just above the head of the boy who was urging the dog after the woodchuck. And everybody who went up or down Maple Avenue got a good view of that masterpiece of realism. Therein your grandmother showed truer courtesy than did you when you put Rodin's Le Baiser in that niche above the second landing of your stairway. The same quality of almost quixotic generosity is suggested by the composition of the old-fashioned holly wreaths, which, hung in the windows, showed to passers-by lustrous green leaves and scarlet berries, and to those who hung them only a circle of pale stems and wire. Even the lithographers maintain this courteous tradition. They stamp their cardboard holly wreaths on only one side, and this is the side which is to face the street. Well, these fenestral firs and hollies exist, and they are among the numerous joys of the days that follow Christmas. These post-Christmas days shine with a light softer but perhaps more comfortable than that of the great feast itself. Particularly is this true of the first day after Christmas, especially when that day is Sunday. In England, of course, as in the time of the late Samuel Pickwick, Esquire, who brought about the renaissance of Christmas, this is called Boxing Day, not because it is the occasion of fistic encounters, but because it is the time appointed for the distribution of those more or less spontaneous expressions of goodwill which are called Christmas boxes. Its more orthodox title is St. Stephen's Day. It is, you know, the day on which the illustrious King Wenceslas, with the assistance of his page, did his noble almoning. Says the old carol, "Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even. Brightly shone the moon that night, though the frost was cruel, when a poor man came in sight, gathering winter fuel. Hither, page, and stand by me, see thou dost it telling, yonder peasant, who is he, where and what his dwelling? Sire, he lives a good league hence, underneath the mountain, over by the forest fence, by St. Agnes' fountain. Bring me flesh and bring me wine, bring me pine logs hither, thou and I will see him dine, when we bear them thither." Page and monarch forth they went together, through the night wind's wild lament and the wintry weather. We are not old English kings, so instead of having our page bring flesh and wine to the poor man on St. Stephen's Day, we give $1 to the youth from the still vexed Bermouths who chaperones the elevator in our apartment house, and for weeks before Christmas we affix to the flaps of the envelopes containing our letters little stamps bearing libellous caricatures of St. Nicholas of Bari. Theoretically, this last process provides a modicum of Christmas cheer for certain carefully selected and organized poor people. However this may be, the fact remains that the day after Christmas is a very good day indeed. The excitement of giving and receiving has passed away. There remains the quieter joy of contemplation. And since this year the day after Christmas is Sunday, this contemplation will not be disturbed by the arrival of the postman, who, a relentless bill-bringer, is like the Greeks, to be feared even when bearing gifts. And in spite of the remarks of every humorist who ever borrowed from his mother-in-law 2 cents to put on an envelope which should carry a joke about her to an editor, this post-Christmas meditation nearly always is pleasant. It is assisted by the consumption of wife-bestowed cigars, which, again despite the humorists, are better than those a man buys for himself. It is a pleasant meditation, for its subjects are things given and things received, good deeds done and good deeds experienced. It also contains this day after Christmas feeling, a quality of reconciliation. Not of reconciliation with ancient enemies, this was all orthodoxly attended to on Christmas Eve, but of reconciliation with affairs, of readjustment. On Christmas Day there may have been some slight disappointment, some fly in the ointment, or worse still, in the punch. Forgetting for a moment that you were just now pictured smoking cigars presented to you by your wife, let us consider you to be, as you probably are, a young woman of some 18 summers and perhaps an equal number of winters. It is the day after Christmas. It is, although you are unaware of the fact, St. Stephen's Day. Yesterday, although you endeavored to conceal the fact, only revealing it in the unnecessary viciousness with which you scrub the remains of a red and white striped candy basket from the countenance of your infant brother, yesterday, I repeat, you were annoyed; and the cause of your annoyance was that you received from the amorous Theophilus a paltry dozen, instead of 24 or 36 American Beauties. Now, however, during your post-Christmas meditation, your annoyance is swept away by the refreshing thought that Theophilus will now have $12 or $24 more to invest in that extraordinary solitaire diamond ring, with which he purposes to decorate your not too reluctant hand as soon as people begin to see through your bluff of not being engaged. This thought cheers you considerably, and you dreamily give the aforesaid infant brother permission to consume a barley-sugar elephant, which makes him very unwell. Or let us, on the other hand, suppose that you, who are now reading this inquiry into the theory of motives and ideas, are that infant brother himself. Your age, we will say, is 3, and you are, we regret to say, somewhat sticky. Nevertheless, your frame of mind is, on the whole, more satisfactory than it was yesterday. You had, in all confidence, requested Santa Claus to bring you a large live baboon. Instead, he brought you a small tin monkey on a stick. This was a genuine disappointment, as poignantly felt as will be any more obvious tragedy of your adult years. But, like all sorrows of childhood, it had the blessed quality of brevity. Now, on the day after Christmas, you contemplate with favor your tin monkey. One of his legs is broken, but he has come off his stick, and is therefore the more agreeable companion. Your father's apology for Santa Claus, to the effect that the baboon of your choice would have walked off with your stockings if he had been placed in them, seems reasonable. And there is manna for your soul in the thought that your father will take you to the Bronx Zoo this afternoon, and that you will then show your tin monkey to the baboon that lives there. This peaceful meditation is one of the most delightfully comfortable features of the day after Christmas. This day has not the concentrated excitement of Christmas. It is, I think, the most restful day in the year. It is not marked, like January, too, with the shock of receiving bills and the strain of keeping new resolutions. It is a delightfully lazy day, a sort of sublimated Sunday afternoon. And one conclusion which you should draw from your St. Stephen's Day meditation is that the nobility of Christmas traditions and customs is proved by their surviving the most unfavorable, even absurd, conditions of life. It was not difficult for the Puritans to destroy the Maypole. Its gay garlands never rose from the dust into which their iron heels trod them. But the Christmas tree, which even more than the Maypole was an idolatrous abomination to those of our forefathers who turned the sword of the Lord and of Gideon against the primitive red citizens of New England, the Christmas tree blooms with new splendor every year. It is set up even in the conventicle and New Salems which the Pilgrims established, and as its green branches glow with their precious freight of scarlet and gold, around it dance, tango in fact, the descendants of John Alden and Priscilla Mullins. But the Christmas tree and its attendant glories have survived an assault sterner than that of the Puritans. They are healthily surviving modern metropolitan conditions, the deadly foe of many gracious things. And the mere fact of survival is itself beautiful. It is very fine, of course, for Santa Claus to clamber down the broad chimney of a great farmhouse. But it is really noble of him to penetrate the mysterious smokestacks of a New York building, and, making some subtle use, I suppose, of the steam radiator, to visit every apartment which has its complement of childhood. It is admirable for a country child to believe in Santa Claus, but how much more admirable is the faith of the city child, the faith which stands the shock of the imitation Santa Clauses who strut about the department stores and beg at every corner. These things, I said, are natural fruits of after-Christmas meditations, and the Christmas tree remains, although the gifts that surround it have been taken away. It is a pleasanter sight than it was yesterday, because it is already a beautiful old friend, a friend to whom we are grateful. It does not look ridiculous because its great day is gone, as, for example, a firecracker looks ridiculous on July 5. For Christmas is more than a day. It is a season, of which December 25 is only the commencement. And as the Christmas tree seems pleasanter and more friendly when some of its needles have formed little green aromatic heaps on the carpet, and when the china angel and 2 or 3 of the red glass balls have been taken down for the baby to play with, so does the Christmas season seem pleasanter and more friendly when its first great feast and pageant has come to its joyous close and become a part of Time's rich treasury of golden days. End of number 2. Number 3 of A Christmas Miscellany by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Number 3, The Gentle Art of Christmas Giving, by Joyce Kilmer. If a dentist stuck a bit of holly in his cap and went through the streets on Christmas morning, his buzzing drill over his shoulder and his forceps in his hand, stopping at the houses of his friends to give their jaws free treatment, meanwhile trolling out lusty Yuletide staves, if he were to do this, I say, it would be said of him, among other things, that he was celebrating Christmas in a highly original manner. Undoubtedly there would be many other adjectives applied to his manner of generosity, adjectives applied, for instance, by the children whom around their gaily festooned tree he surprised with his gift of expert treatment. But the adjective most generally used, not perhaps in adulation, would be original, and the use of this adjective would be utterly wrong. The holly-bedecked dentist would not be acting in an original manner. He would not be following the suggestion of his own philanthropic heart. He would be acting in accordance with tradition, a particularly annoying tradition, the evil and absurd superstition that a gift should be representative of the giver rather than of the recipient. Now, I am aware that there is high literary authority for the dentist's Christmas morning expedition. The dentist himself would be the first to disclaim having originated the idea. If you were to question him, he would tell you, as he deftly adjusted his rubber dam in your mouth, that the credit belonged to the late Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson, the dentist would say as he sharpened the point of his drill, said that a gift was meaningless unless it was a genuine expression of the giver. It would be unfitting, for instance, for a poet to give his friend a house and lot, and a painter, his friend, a diamond necklace. The poet should give a poem, and the painter should give a painting. Therefore it naturally follows that a minister should give a sermon, and a school-teacher should bestow upon his expectant pupils an extra page of mathematical problems. This, the dentist would say, is the gift most expressive of my personality. And the drill would seek its goal. Now, there is much to be said in favor of the Emersonian theory of giving. Certainly it has the advantages of cheapness and convenience. Many a poet could more easily give his friend a whole ode or a sequence of sonnets or a bale of vers libre than he could give a box of cigars or a cigar. Many a painter could more easily cover his children's Christmas tree with his own Cubist canvases than with peppermint canes and toy locomotives and dolls and little trumpets. A storekeeper or a manufacturer of any sort can more easily select his gifts from his own stock than he can select them elsewhere. Should a brewer, for instance, desire to help make Mr. Bryan's Christmas happy, it would be a simpler matter for him to put in that gentleman's stocking a case of beer than a case of grape juice. But cheapness and convenience are not the chief reasons for this sort of giving. A poet who gives a poem when he should give a pair of fur gauntlets, a painter who gives a painting when he should give a doll, does so, it often happens, in spite of the fact that he has thousands of dollars in the bank and lives within a block of a department store which he much enjoys visiting. He gives the gifts that he does give because of his selfishness and conceit. He gives his own wares because they advertise his talent. The poet knows that his friend will not say, to inquiring admirers of his fur gauntlets, "These were given me by Ezra Dusenberry, author of Babylonian Bleatings and Other Lyrics, Smith, Parker & Company, $1 net." The painter knows that the infant he has enriched will not say to her young companions, "Bettina was given me by the illustrious Gaspar Sibelstein, whose incomprehensiblest canvases are now on exhibition at the Microscopic Mania Gallery, 249 Fifth Avenue, New York City." These gentlemen take a violent interest in their own work, and when they give presents of that work, they are trying to force their friends to share that interest and to extend it to all the world. They are trying to force their friends to become their press agents. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule that a giver should not give his own wares. Any man who deals in wares that are universally delightful may express himself in his gifts to his heart's content, and no one will criticize him. So let no brewer or cigar maker or money changer of my acquaintance puzzle his head long in the effort to discover in the marts of the world something appropriate to my peculiar tastes. These honest citizens may be as Emersonian in their giving as they wish. As I said, there is much to commend the idea that inspired the hypothetical dentist on his Yuletide denting. There is much to recommend the gift expressing the giver theory. It is convenient, it is cheap, it is satisfying to the giver's conceit. It is in many respects excellent. But it does not happen to be suited to Christmas Day. It is suited to the celebration of Emerson's birthday, if anyone knows the date of that festival. You see, unselfishness is supposed to be a characteristic of Christmas giving. And unselfishness, true unselfishness, was known to the philosophy of the Transcendentalists as little as it is known to that of the Nietzscheans. He who gives really in accordance with the spirit of the feast gives not to express his own personality, to call attention to his own prowess as a painter or a poet or a candlestick maker, but to make his friend happy. If his friend remembers him when he enjoys the gift, so much the better. But the essential thing is that he shall enjoy the gift. James Russell Lowell represented the founder of the Feast of Christmas as saying, "Who gives himself in his gift feeds three: himself, his suffering neighbor, and me." But in Lowell's mind, when he wrote this, was no idea of justifying the poet who thrusts poems into his friend's Christmas stocking and tips the elevator man with a villanelle. He was thinking of sacrificial giving, of giving which necessitates a sacrifice on the part of the giver rather than on that of the recipient. And it is no sacrifice for a poet to give his poem or his book of poems. James Russell Lowell's distinguished kinswoman, now living in Boston, knows this. If Miss Amy Lowell really loves you, she will give you for Christmas an automobile, or one of her Keats manuscripts, rather than an autographed copy of Sword Blades and Poppy Seeds, or Men, Women, and Ghosts. Few bishops resemble Mark Twain, but there once was a bishop who resembled Mark Twain in this respect, and in no other. He is known to many thousands who do not know his real name. Mark Twain has thousands of friends who never heard of Samuel Langhorne Clemens. And hundreds of thousands of children yearly are gladdened by Santa Claus, yet have no association whatever with the name of St. Nicholas of Bari. Yet the amiable Nicholas, who is the patron of sailors, of prisoners, and of children, is the benefactor of humanity caricatured during December in every shop window and on every eleemosynary corner. His mitre has degenerated into a hat trimmed with doubtful fur. His embroidered cope has become a red jacket. But, except when he rings a little bell and begs for alms, he has retained his extra-episcopal function of giving. St. Nicholas was a master of the art of giving, and since we have taken him so seriously as to transmogrify him into Santa Claus, we should profit by his illustrious example and model our giving upon his. How and what did St. Nicholas give? Well, he gave tactfully and opportunely and appropriately. There was the nobleman of Lucia whose 3 daughters were starving to death. St. Nicholas gave them marriage portions, throwing purses of gold in at the window at night. When he was in Myra, he gave to the poor people all the wheat that was in the ships in the harbor, promising the owners that when they arrived at the port for which they were bound, their ships would still be full of wheat, and so it came about. To a drowned sailor and to children who had been killed by a cannibal, he gave the gift of life; and to innocent men accused of treason and imprisoned, he gave freedom. His first gift, you see, was money; his second, life; his third, freedom. And thus he set an example to all the world. Now it may not be convenient for us to celebrate Christmas by throwing money through the windows of apartments wherein repose dowerless young women; nor are life and freedom gifts for our bestowal. But it is at any rate possible for us to imitate Saint Nicholas's manner of giving, to give tactfully, opportunely, and appropriately. There was nothing especially characteristic of his episcopal functions in the gifts that Saint Nicholas gave; nor did he worry about whether or not they reflected his personality. Let us make Santa Claus resemble Saint Nicholas as closely as we can. This business of expressing one's personality by one's gifts has been carried to extraordinary lengths of late years. There are people who actually select for all their friends and relatives things that they themselves would like. If they consider themselves to be dainty, as all women do, they give dainty presents, disregarding the fact that the recipient may suffer acute physical pain at the mere thought of daintiness. They wish their beneficiaries to say on Christmas morning, "How characteristic of Mrs. Slipslop to give me this exquisite Dresden china chewing gum holder," instead of "How generous and discerning of Mrs. Slipslop to give me this pair of rubber boots, or this jar of tobacco, or this hypodermic syringe." But what every child and every grown person wants to receive is a gift suited to his tastes and habits. It is a matter of indifference whether or not it expresses the personality of the giver. Perhaps it will in his eyes supply the giver with a new and charming personality. You have hitherto regarded Mr. Blinker, the notorious efficiency engineer, with disfavor. You have regarded him as a prosaic theorist, a curdled mass of statistics. On Christmas morning you find that he has presented you, not with an illuminated copy of Rules for Eliminating Leisure, or a set of household ledgers, or an alarm clock, but with a cocktail set, or a pool table, or an Angora kitten, or some other inefficient object. At once your opinion of Mr. Blinker changes for the better. He assumes a new and radiant personality. Your Sunday school teacher has always exhibited to you virtues which you respect but do not enjoy. She has seemed to you lacking in magnetism. If she gives you for Christmas a Bible or a tale of juvenile virtue, you will write her a graceful letter of thanks, at your mother's dictation, but your affection for the estimable lady will not be materially increased. But if your Sunday school teacher gives you a bowie knife, or a revolver, or a set of the Deadwood Dick novels, then how suddenly will the nobility of your Sunday school teacher's nature be revealed to you! To elevator men, janitors, domestic servants, newspaper deliverers, and other necessary evils, we always give something appropriate: money. And money does not express the personalities of most of us. We, that is, the general public, the common people, the populace, the average man, the great washed, and the rest of us, do our duty in this matter, following religiously the admirable tradition of the Christmas box. But our retainers, if they will permit us thus picturesquely to address them, do not. They serve us during the year, and are duly paid for it, but they do nothing picturesque and extraordinary at Christmas time to justify our gifts to them. As a matter of fact, they are not upholding their part of the tradition. It is not enough for them to bow and say thank you while they feverishly count the money. They should revel romantically, as did their predecessors, who established the custom by which they profit. The elevator boys should sing West Indian carols under our windows, especially if our apartment is in the 20th story. The janitor and his family should enact in the basement a Christmas miracle play. It is pleasant to think of the janitor attired as a shepherd or as a wise man, with his children as angels or as sheep, to picture the Yule log on the janitorial hearth, and to hear in fancy, rising up the dumb waiter shaft, the strains of "The Carnal and the Crane," or of the excellent carol which begins: "The shepherd upon a hill he sat, He had on him his tabard and his hat, His tar box, his pipe, and his flaget. His name was called Jolly Jolly Wat, For he was a good herdis boy, Oot hoy! For in his pipe he made so much joy." In some places the newspaper deliverers and the telegraph boys feebly support this tradition by writing, or causing to be written, a carrier's address, and leaving printed copies of it with their customers. It would be better, of course, if they were to sing or to recite these verses, but even the printed address is better than nothing. It is a pity to see even this slight concession to tradition disappearing. In bygone days some of the most distinguished of our poets were glad to write these addresses. The late Richard Watson Gilder wrote one for the newspaper carriers of Newark. And then there are the numerous public servants who nowadays receive from the public no special Christmas benefaction. How gracefully they might obtain it by infusing into their occupations a little Yuletide pageantry! As it is, the subway guards celebrate the golden springtime by donning white raiment. Let them, on Christmas Day, be wreathed with mingled holly and mistletoe, and let them chant in lusty chorus: "God rest you, merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Please slip us some coin, you've got money to boin, and this is Christmas Day." Few subterranean voyagers could resist this appeal. And the street cleaners, how comes it that they are unrewarded of the public? Their predecessors, the crossing sweepers of London 50 years ago, exacted tribute from pedestrians, not only at Christmas time, but on every day of the year. Let our street cleaners assume holiday garb and manner, let them expect Christmas gifts, but give in turn a Christmas spectacle. Methods of doing this will readily suggest themselves. An appropriate thing would be for them to procure medieval attire at any theatrical costumer's, and build great bonfires at such points of vantage as Columbus Circle, Times Square, Madison Square, and Union Square. Over these bonfires boars' heads should be roasted, and great bowls of steaming punch should hang. From passers-by who partook of their hospitality, the street cleaners, through one of their number dressed as an almoner, should request a golden remembrance. These things may yet come to pass. They are not so archaic as seemed in 1913 a world-wide war, and the municipal Christmas trees are a good beginning. But to return to our muttons, or rather to our geese and plum puddings, the most important thing for us to remember in the selection of Christmas presents is their suitability to the person for whom they are intended. We may like books, but let us not therefore feel obliged to sustain our literary reputation by giving books to our neighbor who wants a box of cigars or a jumping jack. We have the precedent, furnished by St. Nicholas, and we have a higher precedent still. For the first great Christmas gift to humanity was what humanity most needed, and always needs, a child. End of number 3. Number 4 of A Christmas Miscellany by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Number 4, Wartime Christmas by Joyce Kilmer. Led by a star, a golden star, the youngest star, an olden star, here the kings and the shepherds are, a-kneeling on the ground. What did they come to the inn to see? God in the highest, and this is He, a baby asleep on his mother's knee, and with her kisses crowned. Now is the earth a dreary place, a troubled place, a weary place. Peace has hidden her lovely face, and turned in tears away. Yet the sun through the war cloud sees babies asleep on their mothers' knees. While there are love and home, and these, there shall be Christmas Day. End of number 4. Number 5 of A Christmas Miscellany by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Number 5, Christmas Letter by Stephen Leacock. In answer to a young lady who hath sent an invitation to be present at a children's party. Mademoiselle, allow me very gratefully but firmly to refuse your kind invitation. You doubtless mean well, but your ideas are unhappily mistaken. Let us understand one another once and for all. I cannot, at my mature age, participate in the sports of children with such abandon as I could wish. I entertain, and have always entertained, the sincerest regard for such games as hunt the slipper and blind man's buff. But I have now reached the time of life when to have my eyes blindfolded, and to have a powerful boy of 10 hit me in the back with a hobby horse and ask me to guess who hit me, provokes me to a fit of retaliation which could only culminate in reckless criminality. Nor can I cover my shoulders with a drawing-room rug and crawl round on my hands and knees under the pretence that I am a bear without a sense of personal insufficiency which is painful to me. Neither can I look on with a complacent eye at the sad spectacle of your young clerical friend, the Reverend Mr. Uttermost Farthing, abandoning himself to such gambols and appearing in the role of life and soul of the evening. Such a degradation of his holy calling grieves me, and I cannot but suspect him of ulterior motives. You inform me that your maiden aunt intends to help you to entertain the party. I have not, as you know, the honor of your aunt's acquaintance, yet I think I may with reason surmise that she will organize games, guessing games, in which she will ask me to name a river in Asia beginning with a Z. On my failure to do so, she will put a hot plate down my neck as a forfeit, and the children will clap their hands. These games, my dear young friend, involve the use of a more adaptable intellect than mine, and I cannot consent to be a party to them. May I say in conclusion that I do not consider a 5-cent pen wiper from the top branch of a Xmas tree any adequate compensation for the kind of evening you propose. I have the honor to subscribe myself your obedient servant. End of number 5. Number 6 of A Christmas Miscellany by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Number 6, A Christmas Pastoral from the California Padres and Their Missions by Charles Francis Saunders. I had camped the day before on the Nacimiento. I wonder who named that stream the Rio del Nacimiento, River of the Nativity. Whoever it was, some friar of the early days, no doubt. I thank thee, Fray, for teaching me that word. And, indeed, California owes no small thanks to those priests, Serra and his companions and followers, who fixed the names upon so many of our geographical features. Contrast Bloody Gulch with Arroyo de las Llagas, and Horse Thief Bluff with Lomas de la Purificacion. So probably it was the fact that my mind had been dwelling upon the attractive name of the attractive little stream, together with my having lately been reading something about Christmas celebrations in old times at the missions, that brought before my mind's eye a picture of one of those simple morality plays, or pastorelas, as they were called, when I sat by my campfire the next night, beside the San Antonio River, and within stone's throw of the ruined mission. The Valley of the Oaks, as regards that part of it that is contiguous to the mission, seems to be in unaccountable disturbance. Usually, for all that can be seen or heard, soon after nightfall the owls and coyotes hold undisturbed possession, unless perhaps for a bar of light that shines from the room where the Padre's candle burns. But tonight, if I may borrow from the great Milton, the stars with deep amaze stand fixed in steadfast gaze. As on that first nativity, for it is again Christmas Eve, La Noche Buena, the Good Night, as the Spaniards name it, and twinkling lights move here and there all about the Mission, which itself sends out a steady beam from open door and high-placed window. A deep bell tone sounds once, then trembles out, solemn but sweet, upon the cold, still air. Another, and another, and at each the Indians, wending toward the church, torch in hand, stop and reverently bend the knee, for it is the token of the Most Holy Trinity. Then marry as you like, Pio, Camillo, Florencio, whoever you are, marry and fast, for an example, though there is no need, to the people who now come hurrying, running, old and young, men and women, boys, girls, and babies, and press through the open doorway. But they check as they enter, again bending the knee and crossing themselves before the mystery typified to their unquestioning, humble minds by blazing altar, star-crowned Madonna, awful crucifix. Within the crowded church all is silence but for the bells that continue their clamor above. Suddenly they cease, and again 3 slow and solemn notes are sounded. The priests enter. The people drop to their knees, and every head is humbly bowed. Good reader, Protestant like myself, let us too kneel and bow the head, in company with ignorant, superstitious Indian, and if it be so, I do not know, haughty, bigoted Spanish priest. It may well be, indeed it surely is, that in his eyes to whom they kneel, we are as ignorant, superstitious, haughty, and bigoted as they. Let us thankfully share our brother's humility as well. A deep, strong voice from the gallery at the rear breaks the hush. It is the Kyrie eleison. Domingo, the old cantor, is singing the first line. Then instruments join in, violins, flutes, bass viols, and many voices, all of men. A strange, resonant singing that somehow is like the Indian himself, somber, dark, joyless. Now the priest's voice rises in the Gloria in Excelsis, and so the solemn service of the midnight Mass proceeds, and with Ite Missa Est closes. Again the bells ring, merry and fast, but the people, instead of leaving the building, stand looking toward the door. The priest, who had gone to the sacristy, now returns, carrying in his arms a small figure of the infant Savior. He stands before the altar rail and invites all who will to approach and kiss the Holy Child. Immediately the women press forward and one by one, awkwardly, reverently, touch their lips to the wondrous babe, their dull eyes and stolid features lightened to a strange thrill in the caress of the beautiful Niño, dimpled, smiling, fair of skin and hair, all that is ideal, adorable, to the dusky, heavy-witted Indian. To sympathize, we need not call it religion, we can reverence at least the eternal womanly. But now the bell ceases, and then comes on the great, the long looked for, long prepared for event of the night, the wonderful Pastorela, arranged by the Padre and rehearsed at frequent intervals for 2 months past by the Indians who are to participate, at huge expenditure of the Padre's patience. The moment has arrived, and a flourish of music from the gallery, a lively rattling tune, announces the opening of the sacred drama. Then through the door come the actors, to the long-drawn breaths of admiration of the adults and the shrill exclamations of round-eyed children. First enters a handsome, smooth-faced young Indian in a tunic of blue, bespangled with gilt stars, and with a similar larger star fastened with wire above his forehead. It is Gabriel, the archangel of the Nativity. Excitement is unbounded and must be expressed in clasped hands and murmurs of, "Ah, the blessed angel! How beautiful!" Next comes an older Indian, dressed in sheepskins, with the wool turned outward, and carrying a crook-headed staff. The word goes round, "It is the shepherd of Belen, the one who talks to the blessed angel." Then appears a figure at sight of which the women press back and hold the children against their knees, a tall, cadaverous personage, face grotesquely painted in blue, white, and yellow, with two small goat's horns projecting from his forehead, and wearing a sleeveless coat, which, like his bare arms and legs, is emblazoned with red flames. He rolls his eyes as he walks, and terrifies the children by poking at them with a rod painted red to imitate heated iron. No need for mutual explanation at this. "El diablo! Satanas!" is whispered shudderingly. Following him comes a clown-like fellow in a fantastic garb, mopping and mowing and pointing as if crazy. He is known as Bartolo, and his function seems to be that of fun-maker, with no bearing upon the serious action of the play. Last enter 6 young girls in white robes reaching to the knee, carrying lighted candles and wearing white, veil-like head coverings, each with a small gilt star. They are plainly angels, and excite great admiration as they walk to their places. But instead of remaining with the other characters in the midst of the church, these go on to where a low platform has been built, just outside the altar rail, on which is an object that is covered with a large white cloth. The angels take their stand, 3 and 3, on each side of the platform. After a moment's pause, Domingo's voice is heard from the gallery. It is the cue, and at once the girls take up the hymn Adeste Fideles, the actors, even including El Diablo and the dubious Bartolo, joining in it. When it is ended, Gabriel advances and announces the birth of the Savior. His words are largely taken from the biblical account, and he ends by declaring that God, El Padre Celestial, has sent a marvelous star to lead all men to the holy birthplace, there to adore the divine infant and to venerate his Virgin Mother. As he finishes his speech he points upward, all eyes turn thither, and a miracle! A large star appears above the altar and is seen slowly to descend. Hands are clasped, and a sigh of wonder and awe goes through the church. Many cross themselves and bend the knee. The star draws nearer, nearer, and at last comes to rest above the veiled object. There is a revulsion as Satan now steps forward and, addressing the shepherd, combats the archangel's words. He declares that by Adam's fall mankind has passed forever under his dominion, and that hope of redemption is vain. His speech is a long one, but is listened to with deep attention by the people, in spite of the comicalities of Bartolo, who, all the time it is in progress, is employed in gestures and antics which appear to have Satan himself as their principal object. All seem to feel that solemn events hang upon the argument, and there is a hush of anxiety when he ceases. Gabriel again takes the word and relates how the Father has mercifully ordained that for all who humbly repent of their evil lives and diligently pray to him, there is a way of escape from the destruction due to Adam's transgression. He directs the shepherd's attention to a cross, which he holds before him, and the shepherd, sinking upon his knees, adores the symbol of redemption. But the devil, at his other side, attempts to distract him from his devotion with whispers and demonstrations with his red-hot weapon, mimicked in every action by the irrepressible Bartolo, whose intention is to throw ridicule upon the evil one. Gabriel intervenes by advancing between Satan and the shepherd, and presenting the cross toward the former, calls upon him to forbear his temptations and threats directed to the shepherd, and to acknowledge himself vanquished and adore the eternal majesty. The devil, cowed by the virtue of the cross, unwillingly kneels, while the angels, at a signal from Domingo, break into a song of victory. Gabriel, cross in hand, now leads the shepherd toward the star, Bartolo and the devil following. As they reach the platform, the archangel draws the veil aside and reveals a rude, straw-filled manger, in which is seen the image of the Holy Child, while at the head is a small statue of the Virgin. Then comes a closing tableau, the archangel, the angels with lighted candles, the shepherd, and Bartolo grouped about the manger, El Diablo in the background, and the star shining over all. The Padre comes forward and invites all to approach in order and view the manger and El Niño Salvator. There is a long sigh from the watchers, who seem loath to break the spell that has held them absorbed, hardly breathing. It is broken for them by the bells, which again ring out in lively din. Men, women, and children press forward, bowing and crossing themselves as in turn they pass the central figures, and then cluster about the platform, chattering gaily, a rare outbreaking for the grave, silent Indians, almost as if they felt that, with the happy dénouement, their own dark shadow had truly been lifted. Perhaps they did feel so, for they were simple as children, and it is, after all, as by little children that the kingdom of heaven must be received. Bartolo and El Diablo, the play being done, hovered on the outskirts of the crowd, indulging in all manner of uncouth antics, to the delight of the men and boys, and the hopeless bewilderment of many very sleepy babies. While still the bells ring lustily, the concourse gradually disperses, and the pastorella, crude indeed, but sincere, and therefore no doubt effective for its purpose, is over. Barely in time for Padre and people to snatch a little sleep before the bells will ring once more to summon them to the solemn early service, the Misa del Gallo, or cock-crow Mass, of Christmas Day. End of number 6. Number 7 of A Christmas Miscellany by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Number 7, Christmas in the Woods, by Dallas Laurie Sharp. On the night before this particular Christmas, every creature of the woods that could stir was up and stirring, for over the old snow was falling swiftly, silently, a soft, fresh covering that might mean a hungry Christmas, unless the dinner were had before morning. But when the morning dawned, a cheery Christmas sun broke across the great gum swamp, lighting the snowy boles and soft-piled limbs of the giant trees with indescribable glory, and pouring a golden flood into the deep, spongy bottoms below. It would be a perfect Christmas in the woods, clear, mild, stirless, with silent footing for me, and everywhere the telltale snow. And everywhere the Christmas spirit, too. As I paused among the pointed cedars of the pasture, looking down into the cripple at the head of the swamp, a clear wild whistle rang in the thicket, followed by a flash through the alders like a tongue of fire, as a cardinal grosbeak shot down to the tangle of greenbrier and magnolia under the slope. It was a fleck of flaming summer. As warm as summer, too, the staghorn sumac burned on the crest of the ridge against the group of holly trees as fresh as April, and all aglow with berries. The woods were decorated for the holy day. The gentleness of the soft, new snow touched everything. Cheer and goodwill lighted the unclouded sky and warmed the thick depths of the evergreens, and blazed in the crimson-berried bushes of the ilex and alder. The Christmas woods were glad. Nor was the gladness all show, mere decoration. There was real cheer in abundance, for I was back in the old home woods, back along the Cohansey, back where you can pick persimmons off the trees at Christmas. There are persons who say the Lord might have made a better berry than the strawberry, but he didn't. Perhaps he didn't make the strawberry at all. But he did make the Cohansey Creek persimmon, and he made it as good as he could. Nowhere else under the sun can you find such persimmons as these along the creek, such richness of flavor, such gummy, candied, quality, woodsy, wild, crude. Especially the fruit of two particular trees on the west bank, near Lupton's Pond. But they never come to this perfection, never quite lose their pucker, until midwinter, as if they had been intended for the Christmas table of the woods. It had been nearly 20 years since I crossed this pasture of the cedars on my way to the persimmon trees. The cows had been crossing every year, yet not a single new crook had they worn in the old paths. But I was half afraid as I came to the fence where I could look down upon the pond and over to the persimmon trees. Not one of the Luptons who owned pasture and pond and trees had ever been a boy, so far as I could remember, or had ever eaten of those persimmons. Would they have left the trees through all these years? I pushed through the hedge of cedars and stopped for an instant, confused. The very pond was gone, and the trees. No, there was the pond, but how small the patch of water, and the 2 persimmon trees! The bush and undergrowth had grown these 20 years. Which way? Ah, there they stand, only their lifeless tops showing. But see the hard angular limbs, how closely globed with fruit, how softly etched upon the sky. I hurried around to the trees and climbed the one with the 2 broken branches, up, clear up to the top, into the thick of the persimmons. Did I say it had been 20 years? That could not be. 20 years would have made me a man, and this sweet, real taste in my mouth only a boy could know. But there was college and marriage, a Massachusetts farm, 4 boys of my own, and no matter, it could not have been years, 20 years, since. It was only yesterday that I last climbed this tree and ate the rich, rimy fruit frosted with the Christmas snow. And yet, could it have been yesterday? It was storming, and I clung here in the swirling snow, and heard the wild ducks go over in their hurry toward the bay. Yesterday, and all this change in the vast tree-top world, this huddled pond, those narrowed meadows, that shrunken creek. I should have eaten the persimmons and climbed straight down, not stopped to gaze out upon the pond, and away over the dark ditches to the creek. But reaching out quickly, I gathered another handful, and all was yesterday again. I filled both pockets of my coat and climbed down. I kept those persimmons and am tasting them tonight. Lupton's pond may fill to a puddle, and the meadows may shrivel, the creek dry up and disappear, and old Time may even try his wiles on me. But I shall foil him to the end, for I am carrying still in my pocket some of yesterday's persimmons, persimmons that ripened in the rime of a winter when I was a boy. High and alone in a bare persimmon tree for one's dinner hardly sounds like a Merry Christmas, but I was not alone. I had noted the fresh tracks beneath the tree before I climbed up, and now I saw that the snow had been partly brushed from several of the large limbs as the 'possum had moved about in the tree for his Christmas dinner. We were guests at the same festive board, and both of us at Nature's invitation. It mattered not that the 'possum had eaten and gone this hour or more. Such is good form in the woods. He was expecting me, so he came early out of modesty, and that I too might be entirely at my ease, he departed early, leaving his greetings for me in the snow. Thus I was not alone. Here was good company, and plenty of it. I never lack a companion in the woods when I can pick up a trail. The 'possum and I ate together, and this was just the fellowship I needed, this sharing the persimmon with the 'possum. I had broken bread, not with the 'possum only, but with all the out-of-doors. I was now fit to enter the woods, for I was filled with good-will and persimmons, as full as the 'possum, and putting myself under his gentle guidance, I got down upon the ground, took up his clumsy trail, and descended toward the swamp. Such an entry is one of the particular joys of the winter. To go in with a fox, a mink, or a 'possum through the door of the woods is to find yourself at home. Anyone can get inside the out-of-doors, as the grocery boy or the census man gets inside our houses. You can bolt in at any time on business. A trail, however, is Nature's invitation. There may be other better beaten paths for mere feet, but go softly with the 'possum, and at the threshold you are met by the spirit of the wood, you are made the guest of the open, silent, secret out of doors. I went down with the 'possum. He had traveled home leisurely and without fear, as his tracks plainly showed. He was full of persimmons. A good, happy world this, where such fare could be had for the picking. What need to hurry home, except one were in danger of falling asleep by the way? So I thought too as I followed his winding path, and if I was tracking him to his den, it was only to wake him for a moment with the compliments of the season. But it was not even a momentary disturbance, for when I finally found him in his hollow gum, he was sound asleep, and only half realized that some one was poking him gently in the ribs and wishing him a Merry Christmas. The 'possum had led me to the center of the empty, hollow swamp, where the great bold gums lifted their branches like a timbered, unshingled roof between me and the wide sky. Far away through the spaces of the rafters I saw a pair of wheeling buzzards, and under them, in lesser circles, a broad-winged hawk. Here at the feet of the tall, clean trees, looking up through the leafless limbs, I had something of a measure for the flight of the birds. The majesty and the mystery of the distant, buoyant wings were singularly impressive. I have seen the turkey buzzard sailing the skies on the bitterest winter days. To-day, however, could hardly be called winter. Indeed, nothing yet had felt the pinch of the cold. There was no hunger yet in the swamp, though this new snow had scared the raccoons out, and their half-human tracks along the margin of the swamp stream showed that, if not hungry, they at least feared that they might be. For a coon hates snow. He will invariably sleep off the first light snowfalls, and even in the late winter he will not venture forth in fresh snow unless driven by hunger or some other dire need. Perhaps, like a cat or a hen, he dislikes the wetting of his feet. Or it may be that the soft snow makes bad hunting for him. The truth is, I believe, that such a snow makes too good hunting for the dogs and the gunner. The new snow tells too clear a story. His home is no inaccessible den among the ledges, only a hollow in some ancient oak or tupelo. Once within, he is safe from the dogs, but the long, fierce fight for life taught him generations ago that the nest tree is a fatal trap when behind the dogs come the axe and the gun. So he has grown wary and enduring. He waits until the snow grows crusty, when without sign, and almost without scent, he can slip forth among the long shadows and prowl to the edge of dawn. Skirting the stream out toward the higher back woods, I chanced to spy a bunch of snow in one of the great sour gums that I thought was an old nest. A second look showed me tiny green leaves, then white berries, then mistletoe. It was not a surprise, for I had found it here before, a long, long time before. It was back in my schoolboy days, back beyond those 20 years, that I first stood here under the mistletoe and had my first romance. There was no chandelier, no pretty girl in that romance, only a boy, the mistletoe, the giant trees, and the somber, silent swamp. Then there was his discovery, the thrill of deep delight, and the wonder of his knowledge of the strange, unnatural plant. All plants had been plants to him until one day he read the life of the mistletoe. But that was English mistletoe, so the boy's wonder world of plant life was still as far away as Mars, when, rambling alone through the swamp along the creek, he stopped under a big, curious bunch of green high up in one of the gums, and made his first discovery. So the boy climbed up again this Christmas Day at the peril of his precious neck, and brought down a bit of that old romance. I followed the stream along through the swamp to the open meadows, and then on under the steep wooded hillside that ran up to the higher land of corn and melon fields. Here, at the foot of the slope, the winter sun lay warm, and here in the sheltered briery border I came upon the Christmas birds. There was a great variety of them, feeding and preening and chirping in the vines. The tangle was a twitter with their quiet, cheery talk. Such a medley of notes you could not hear at any other season outside a city bird store. How far the different species understood one another I should like to know, and whether the hum of voices meant sociability to them, as it certainly meant to me. Doubtless the first cause of their flocking here was the sheltered warmth and the great numbers of berry-laden bushes, for there was no lack either of abundance or variety on the Christmas table. In sight from where I stood hung branches of withering chicken or frost grapes, plump clusters of blue-black berries of the greenbrier, and limbs of the smooth winterberry bending with their flaming fruit. There were bushes of crimson ilex, too, trees of fruiting dogwood and holly, cedars in berry, dwarf sumac, and seedy sedges, while patches on the wood slopes uncovered by the sun were spread with trailing partridge berry and the coral-fruited wintergreen. I had eaten part of my dinner with the 'possum. I picked a quantity of these wintergreen berries and continued my meal with the birds. And they also had enough and to spare. Among the birds in the tangle was a large flock of northern fox sparrows, whose vigorous and continuous scratching in the bared spots made a most lively and cheery commotion. Many of them were splashing about in tiny pools of snow water, melted partly by the sun and partly by the warmth of their bodies as they bathed. One would hop to a softening bit of snow at the base of a tussock, keel over and begin to flop, soon sending up a shower of sparkling drops from his rather chilly tub. A winter snow water bath seemed a necessity, a luxury indeed, for they all indulged, splashing with the same purpose and zest that they put into their scratching among the leaves. A much bigger splashing drew me quietly through the bushes to find a marsh hawk giving himself a Christmas souse. The scratching, washing, and talking of the birds, the masses of green in the cedars, holly, and laurels, the glowing colors of the berries against the snow, the blue of the sky, and the golden warmth of the light, made Christmas in the heart of the noon that the very swamp seemed to feel. 3 months later there was to be scant picking here, for this was the beginning of the severest winter I ever knew. From this very ridge in February I had reports of berries gone, of birds starving, of whole coveys of quail frozen dead in the snow. But neither the birds nor I dreamed to day of any such hunger and death. A flock of robins whirled into the cedars above me. A pair of cardinals whistled back and forth. Tree sparrows, juncos, nuthatches, chickadees, and cedar birds cheeped among the trees and bushes, and from the farmlands at the top of the slope rang the calls of meadowlarks. Halfway up the hill I stopped under a blackjack oak, where in the thin snow there were signs of something like a Christmas revel. The ground was sprinkled with acorn shells and trampled over with feet of several kinds and sizes, quail, jay, and partridge feet, rabbit, squirrel, and mice feet, all over the snow as the Feast of Acorns had gone on. Hundreds of the acorns were lying about, gnawed away at the cup end, where the shell was thinnest, many of them further broken and cleaned out by the birds. As I sat studying the signs in the snow, my eye caught a tiny trail leading out from the others straight away toward a broken pile of cordwood. The tracks were planted one after the other, so directly in line as to seem like the prints of a single foot. "That's a weasel's trail," I said, "the death's head at this feast," and followed it slowly to the wood. A shiver crept over me as I felt, even sooner than I saw, a pair of small, sinister eyes fixed upon mine. The evil pointed head, heavy but alert, and with a suggestion of fierce strength out of all relation to the slender body, was watching me from between the sticks of cordwood. And so he had been watching the mice and birds and rabbits feasting under the tree. I packed a ball of snow round and hard, slipped forward upon my knees, and hurled it. Spat! It struck the end of a stick within an inch of the ugly head, filling the crevice with snow. Instantly the head appeared at another crack, and another ball struck viciously beside it. Now it was back where it first appeared, and did not flinch for the next, nor the next ball. The third went true, striking with a chug and packing the crack, but the black, hating eyes were still watching me a foot lower down. It is not all peace and goodwill in the Christmas woods, but there is more of peace and goodwill than of any other spirit. The weasels are few. More friendly and timid eyes were watching me than bold and murderous. It was foolish to want to kill, even the weasel. For one's woods are what one makes them, and so I let the man with the gun, who chanced along, think that I had turned boy again, and was snowballing the woodpile, just for the fun of trying to hit the end of the biggest stick. I was glad he had come. As he strode off with his stained bag, I felt kindlier toward the weasel. There were worse in the woods than he, worse because all their killing was pastime. The weasel must kill to live, and if he gloated over the kill, why, what fault of his? But the other weasel, the one with the blood-stained bag, he killed for the love of killing. I was glad he was gone. The crows were winging over toward their great roost in the pines when I turned toward the town. They, too, had had good picking along the creek flats and ditches of the meadows. Their powerful wing beats and constant play told of full crops and no fear for the night, already softly gray across the white, silent fields. The air was crisper. The snow began to crackle underfoot. The twigs creaked and rattled as I brushed along. A brown beech leaf wavered down and skated with a thin scratch over crust. And pure as the snow-wrapped crystal world, and sweet as the soft gray twilight, came the call of a quail. The voices, colors, odors, and forms of summer were gone. The very face of things had changed. All had been reduced, made plain, simple, single, pure. There was less for the senses, but how much keener now their joy! The wide landscape, the frosty air, the tinkle of tiny icicle, and out of the quiet of the falling twilight the voice of the quail. There is no day but is beautiful in the woods, and none more beautiful than one like this Christmas day, warm and still and wrapped to the round red berries of the holly in the magic of the snow. End of number 7. Number 8 of A Christmas Miscellany by Various. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Number 8, Hoodoo McFiggin's Christmas by Stephen Leacock. This Santa Claus business is played out. It's a sneaking underhand method, and the sooner it's exposed the better. For a parent to get up under cover of the darkness of night and palm off a 10-cent necktie on a boy who had been expecting a $10 watch, and then say that an angel sent it to him, is low, undeniably low. I had a good opportunity of observing how the thing worked this Christmas in the case of young Hoodoo McFiggin, the son and heir of the McFiggins, at whose house I board. Hoodoo McFiggin is a good boy, a religious boy. He had been given to understand that Santa Claus would bring nothing to his father and mother because grown-up people don't get presents from the angels. So he saved up all his pocket money and bought a box of cigars for his father and a 75-cent diamond brooch for his mother. His own fortunes he left in the hands of the angels, but he prayed. He prayed every night for weeks that Santa Claus would bring him a pair of skates and a puppy dog and an air gun and a bicycle and a Noah's Ark and a sleigh and a drum. Altogether about $150 worth of stuff. I went into Hoodoo's room quite early Christmas morning. I had an idea that the scene would be interesting. I woke him up, and he sat up in bed, his eyes glistening with radiant expectation, and began hauling things out of his stocking. The first parcel was bulky. It was done up quite loosely, and had an odd look generally. "Ha, ha!" Hoodoo cried gleefully as he began undoing it. "I'll bet it's the puppy dog, all wrapped up in paper." And was it the puppy dog? No, by no means. It was a pair of nice, strong, No. 4 boots, laces and all, labeled "Hoodoo from Santa Claus," and underneath Santa Claus had written 95 net. The boy's jaw fell with delight. "It's boots," he said, and plunged in his hand again. He began hauling away at another parcel with renewed hope on his face. This time the thing seemed like a little round box. Hoodoo tore the paper off it with a feverish hand. He shook it. Something rattled inside. "It's a watch and chain! It's a watch and chain!" he shouted. Then he pulled the lid off. And was it a watch and chain? No. It was a box of nice, brand new celluloid collars, a dozen of them all alike and all his own size. The boy was so pleased that you could see his face crack up with pleasure. He waited a few minutes until his intense joy subsided. Then he tried again. This time the packet was long and hard. It resisted the touch and had a sort of funnel shape. "It's a toy pistol!" said the boy, trembling with excitement. "Gee, I hope there are lots of caps with it. I'll fire some off now and wake up Father." No, my poor child, you will not wake your father with that. It is a useful thing, but it needs not caps and it fires no bullets, and you cannot wake a sleeping man with a toothbrush. Yes, it was a toothbrush, a regular beauty, pure bone all through, and ticketed with a little paper, "Hoodoo from Santa Claus." Again the expression of intense joy passed over the boy's face, and the tears of gratitude started from his eyes. He wiped them away with his toothbrush and passed on. The next packet was much larger and evidently contained something soft and bulky. It had been too long to go into the stocking and was tied outside. "I wonder what this is," Hoodoo mused, half afraid to open it. Then his heart gave a great leap, and he forgot all his other presents in the anticipation of this one. "It's the drum!" he gasped. "It's the drum all wrapped up." Drum nothing. It was pants, a pair of the nicest little short pants, yellowish-brown short pants, with dear little stripes of color running across both ways, and here again Santa Claus had written, "Hoodoo from Santa Claus, 1/4 net." But there was something wrapped up in it. Oh, yes, there was a pair of braces wrapped up in it, braces with a little steel sliding thing so that you could slide your pants up to your neck if you wanted to. The boy gave a dry sob of satisfaction. Then he took out his last present. "It's a book," he said as he unwrapped it. "I wonder if it is fairy stories or adventures. Oh, I hope it's adventures! I'll read it all morning." No, Hoodoo, it was not precisely adventures. It was a small family Bible. Hoodoo had now seen all his presents, and he arose and dressed. But he still had the fun of playing with his toys. That is always the chief delight of Christmas morning. First he played with his toothbrush. He got a whole lot of water and brushed all his teeth with it. This was huge. Then he played with his collars. He had no end of fun with them, taking them all out one by one and swearing at them, and then putting them back and swearing at the whole lot together. The next toy was his pants. He had immense fun there, putting them on and taking them off again, and then trying to guess which side was which by merely looking at them. After that he took his book and read some adventures called Genesis till breakfast time. Then he went downstairs and kissed his father and mother. His father was smoking a cigar, and his mother had her new brooch on. Hoodoo's face was thoughtful, and a light seemed to have broken in upon his mind. Indeed, I think it altogether likely that next Christmas he will hang on to his own money and take chances on what the angels bring. End of Part 8. End of A Christmas Miscellany by Various.